WCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, March 5th, 2020. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. We're sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit, Michigan. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. Well, it's playoff time, and we haven't featured an Atlantic hockey matchup yet this season, but there's a great one coming up in the first round of the playoffs as Canisius travels to Bentley.
And joining us now on the Game of the Week podcast, the head coach of the Bentley Falcons, that's Ryan Soderquist. Ryan, you had a challenging weekend last weekend. You had to find ways to win games to make sure that you were playing at home this weekend in the first round of the Atlantic hockey playoffs. You take 2 games from Holy Cross. You're now at home. How does your team feel? How do you feel heading into this weekend against Canisius?
I like the scenario last weekend of having to get points in our last regular season weekend and put our guys under the pressure. And I think they rose to the occasion. So I was really proud of the way that the guys battled last week, securing the points needed to be at home. And I like the way that we're playing coming out of last weekend. And the guys are really positive and playing with a lot of energy right now.
When you look at this season, I think that coaches tend to kind of make a season about moments. I go back to the beginning. You beat a very good New Hampshire team in overtime at home. You went on a 5-game winning streak not too long ago, at the end of January. You swept Mercyhurst, you sweep Niagara. Then you beat a very good Army team at home again. And then there's a few losses in there, before you get to last weekend. How do you handle the highs and the lows, the good moments, and try to emphasize the good and not get too down on some of the tough moments in the season?
Yeah, I mean, the season is ebbs and flows. It's ups and downs. It's a long year, and we've had some ups and downs, but I think that we've always bounced back. So I've been really proud of that. And, kind of looking at big picture, I felt really strong that we played, kind of like 8 out of 10 really good games down the stretch. And kind of a big sample there. I really like the way that we played the second half. And like I said, one of our losses came to Arizona State, and that was a game that I thought we played really well and outplayed them, and we just happened to lose. So I was happy with that effort. And, we had a tough weekend out in RIT, and they were much better than us and more prepared, and we didn't play well. But we responded, and that's what I really liked about this group that we have this year is we found ways to respond. And we did that this past weekend. So like I said, as a big sample down the stretch, I feel really confident in the way that we've played out of, about 8 out of 10 games.
As you get into the smaller things, the little things in the game, you're heading into the playoffs. What do you like most about your team right now? Some of the X's and O's that you think you're executing well on, and maybe what are some of the areas you really think you need still, even a little bit, as late as we are in the season, you could still use a little bit of work on?
Last weekend, we were really good special teams, and obviously special teams and goaltending, and we win a lot of games in college hockey. So I think that was an area that we cleaned up after our bye week, after RIT, and we were not very good out at RIT and special teams, and we were this past weekend. But overall, in terms of our team defense, I think that we've been really strong. The second half of the year, we've been limiting teams to shots on net, hovering around 23, 24 max, which I really like to see. So I like our team defense heading in the playoffs, and I think that was a big stride that we took the second half of the year.
One of the things that's unusual for Atlantic hockey, at least historically, is to have big, skilled guys on the team. And 3 of your top 4 scorers who've also skated together, Yakov Novak, Matt Gashevsky, and Luke Santurno, all pretty sizable guys, but also skilled. What advantage do you get out of having some big guys like that in a league where that's not as common?
Well, obviously their size and skill combination is hard to handle. On the offensive side, below the dot, they do a good job in terms of, taking on other teams' defense and puck possession. They're a tough group to handle. There's not a lot of defensemen in our league that, can match that size. And obviously when those 3 guys are moving their feet offensively down low, that they can do some damage. So it's a big line. But like you said, it's also a big line combined with skill. So, very, very fortunate to have that group. And when they're playing well, they continue to say they're a tough group to handle.
In net, you've had time split between Aiden Polino, the the senior and the sophomore Fraser Kirk. And I know Kirk got a little bit tweaked during the RIT weekend. What is the outlook for goaltenders going forward into the playoffs?
Yeah, we're obviously day to day there, and Kirk's injury is day to day. He has actually not been back on the ice yet with the team, but could be as soon as the next couple of days. It was a low ankle sprain, and as soon as he's ready, he'll be ready to get back there and battle. But right now, we're extremely confident with Aiden, and especially the way that he played last weekend and made some really big saves for us, especially on Friday night in a really close game. So I'm really proud of the way that he battled, and the guys are extremely excited to play in front of him come tomorrow night.
You had Canisius in your arena back in January. A couple of very exciting games, unfortunately for the Falcons, losing on the extra point, but 2 ties with a Canisius squad who's had some similar ups and downs through the season. What are you looking for from the Golden Griffins as they come in this weekend?
Yeah, they're a good team. I know second half of the year, their goaltenders played well, the young guy, and they have some extremely skilled forwards up front with Hoover and Hutchinson and a couple of those guys. So, we have to defend hard and defend well and be on top of those guys. They're a well-coached team, as most teams in the league are. And, I know that in their second half, they've had a good second half and a good run. They did we had 2 ties at home, 2 games that we blew a multi-goal lead in the third period. So, it's obviously fresh in our mind that this is a team that we thought stole points from us earlier in the year. And we're looking to come out and give it our all this weekend to revenge ourselves there.
You get to play these games at home, second season in a beautiful, kind of a jewel of an arena, Bentley Arena. It's 2 years into that, and I know we've talked about this before, but what has this meant for your team and for your program to have such a terrific facility?
Yeah, it's been a huge boost, obviously, for the program and for the school at whole. Our alumni have come back really strong, and that's including, obviously, non-hockey alumni as well, for a lot of our events and our games this year. So it's been a big addition to the school as a whole, but as a hockey program, it's helped us quite a bit. It's actually probably taken us a couple of years, to kind of seem like this year, especially second half, where we're just really comfortable playing at home. And, the newness is kind of worn off, which I think has been a good thing. I really do think the second half of this year we've been really comfortable being in the arena and playing our games there.
Ryan, I know Ed asked you specifically about Canisius, but the playoffs are just a different beast. And when you're a coach going into a playoff series, how do you approach it with your players? Is there a different message? I know most coaches just love to talk about the game ahead of them, and there's a lot of cliches that go with that. But are playoffs different in terms of how players just have to approach each game, maybe even manage each game?
Definitely. I think the biggest approach difference is we're trying to do is to not make it that big of a deal. We know who we are. We know, we're battle tested at this point in time of the year, and we just don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of thinking too much about series and winning series. And we just have to really stay focused on just winning each shift and playing the next shift. And we know if we do that through the process, we can be in good shape. So it kind of just real focus on just kind of keeping it simple and keeping it one shift at a time.
You've done this long enough as a coach. How difficult is it to deliver that exact message about keeping it one shift at a time to kids that are anywhere between 18 and 23 years old?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, emotionally, guys know what's at stake. And they know, obviously, the series, and they're getting excited for the playoffs and looking ahead and what could happen and where you could be and all that. But just staying grounded. And I think that we've done a really nice job of that. And especially last weekend, I said I liked the fact that we had to get points to be at home, and we handled it well. We just played very simple. We played calm. Our bench mannerism was really calm. We did a really good job there in the locker room of guys just staying focused. So, I think they just have to draw off their experiences, and we have older guys that have been there before and continue to lead by just keeping it simple. But yeah, there's emotions. Hey, they're 18, 19, 20 years old. I have emotions as well. So, you just got to keep reminding yourself to stay calm and let it play out.
Well, it should be a great weekend of hockey. Bentley hosts Canisius. It's the first round of the Atlantic Hockey playoffs. And for at least Bentley and pretty much every team in the league, it feels like this is not the first week of playoffs because things have been so tight down the stretch. But Ryan Soderquist, enjoy this weekend. Hopefully you're still alive in the playoffs. Maybe we'll talk to you down the road. But thanks for taking the time with us today, and best of luck, obviously, throughout the rest of the season.
Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate it.
That's Bentley head coach Ryan Soderquist. We'll have more on that game, plus the other playoff series around the 4 leagues that are in playoff mode, and a look at the 2 leagues that are trying to decide some things. We'll have that in a moment after this word from our sponsor, the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Every time you show up, every time you make your presence heard, whether you clap your hands or stomp your feet, lead the chant, or join the chorus. However you choose to be a fan, you make the game. The NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 to get your tickets today.
Welcome back to the Game of the Week podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, if I could be somewhere in Atlantic hockey this weekend, definitely Bentley Arena would be the place I would want to be. These 2 teams had a terrific competitive head-to-head series in Bentley back in January. A 3-3 tie and a 4-4 tie. Canisius picked up the extra point on a shootout on Friday and a 3-on-3 win on Saturday. It's going to be interesting. Both teams rely heavily on their first lines and a bit on their second lines. And there's quite a difference there. Bentley has a ton of size on their first line, as we talked about with Ryan. But Canisius, on the other hand, not as big, but they have a lot of speed on the first line. And it's going to be interesting to see how those match up.
I think you go back to that series in January, and my recollection is that Bentley had 3-goal leads in both games and let those slip, and then Canisius ends up getting the extra point both nights. And I'm sure that Ryan Soderquist and his staff probably felt pretty dejected after that series. And they've actually turned things around in a good way since then. You heard him talk about the fact that they thought they had a very good second half. But you do have to take a lot of caution with the speed of Canisius. I think that's one of their big, their major pluses. And Bentley, I think they have their size at the forward position, their ability to battle for position in front of the net. I really like them on the power play. You heard him, Ryan, talk about how well their team played in the power play last week, and I think that there's a lot of built-in assets to Bentley, but I think that they have a really dangerous opponent. This is not probably the first round opponent you want to draw if you're Bentley. It'll be a tough series for both teams.
May also come down a bit to goaltending. The freshman at Canisius, Jacob Barczewski, has been terrific since he took over the starting role, and Aiden Polino is having a good finish to the season. So it should be a good matchup between those 2 ends of the ice. Well, when we turn to a couple other series in Atlantic hockey, and I should insert here that there has always been a first-round lower seed winning a series, and it's going to be a really uphill battle if it's going to be Mercyhurst. They traveled back out to Air Force where they were a couple of weeks ago. They had a 1-1 tie the first night. Air Force won on the 3-on-3, and then a 2-1 Air Force win, even though Air Force heavily outshot Mercyhurst. Over 40 shots on goal to low 20s for the Lakers. But this is a tough one for a young team that Rick Gawkin is bringing out to Air Force, and a team that's had a few injuries.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, if there's anything I see in college hockey that I would hate to play against, it's a Rick Gawkin team in the postseason. His teams have been shocking at times. They've done some great things. And he's been talking about this postseason for almost a month. He said when there was 8 or 9 or 10 games left in the regular season, he said, we have a bunch of exhibition games left. We know we're finishing in last place. All we're doing is getting ready for the playoffs. So they've been preparing for this game for a long time. Long trip. They went out there. I know that they're there. I've seen the Twitter feeds today saying that they're there and everything's set up. And listen, go get them. It can be the great upset when the 11 beats the 6. And that's, I think, exactly what, Rick Gawkin's approach has to be. Let's be the team that becomes the upset, the spoiler. And they are a team that can do it.
The other matchup, Holy Cross is at Robert Morris. Both teams were swept last weekend. Holy Cross by Bentley and Robert Morris by Niagara. Robert Morris has lost 9 of their last 14. Holy Cross has lost 5 in a row, and the two teams split at Holy Cross earlier this season, back in the middle of February. Both teams are solid. I think the real edge in this one is how explosive Holy Cross can be.
Yeah, two really well-coached teams here. I think that Robert Morris, has to play structural. They have to be sound. They have to make sure that they don't let 2-on-1s and odd man rushes happen, because Holy Cross capitalizes every time they seem to have one of those situations. You have to be structurally sound, and this should be a series that Robert Morris is favored in. But Holy Cross, as you said, they score goals, they explode in bunches, and you just can't be in a position where you give those things up. But I look at goals scored. In league, Holy Cross actually has more. It's the goals allowed that has been the big problem for Holy Cross. They've got to keep the puck out of their net. That's a big part of what goes on this weekend.
In the Big Ten, you got to love when teams that just played match up in the playoffs. Wisconsin is at number 11 Ohio State. Last weekend, a 3-2 win for Wisconsin, a 3-3 tie, and Wisconsin got the extra point. So 5 points out of the weekend. They kept Ohio State out of first place overall in the league. And on Saturday, Wisconsin came back from being down 3-0. What do you see in this series?
Well, I think every one of these series are going to be competitive in this league, and Wisconsin has just become such a little dark horse. And not that they weren't a team that should have been good this year. They should have been fantastic with some of their freshmen. But listen, freshmen don't always gel. But we all know that after Christmas, freshmen aren't freshmen. They're already really sophomores in most coaches' minds, and their talent on the back on the younger classes, they're gonna shine through, and that's got to be the biggest worry, I think, for Ohio State this weekend is that Wisconsin could find a way to take this series. And that is, it's got to be in the back of your head. And you don't have a lot of confidence if you're Ohio State. You didn't get the championship that you thought you might get. You didn't get the first round bye. So I think that anytime that confidence lacks, we said it a few weeks ago, Wisconsin could win this whole tournament as the 7th seed. I wouldn't be so shocked by it. That's how close this league was really from the top of the year to the end of the year.
The other two matchups are pretty interesting. Notre Dame is at number 19 Minnesota. The two teams were 1-1-2 this season, but Minnesota got the shootout and the 3-on-3 in those two ties. So 7 out of 12 points for the Gophers. The other, a longtime grudge match, Michigan State at Michigan. The interesting thing out of these two series is you got to win to keep going. None of these teams are in a good position for the postseason. Minnesota's on the bubble. Everybody else is on the outside looking in.
Yeah, that's for certain. And you can even go back to Ohio State. I think if they get swept this weekend, they might be outside looking in as well. I think that's the biggest problem in the Big Ten. But, Michigan State, you get a great rivalry. Why not put it in a playoff? That's great. But I think that Minnesota-Notre Dame matchup, that's really interesting because they played so evenly throughout the year. And you look at everything about these teams. They're, goals for, goals against, pretty even. No, neither of these teams is an offensive juggernaut. Neither of these teams gives up a ridiculous amount of goals. They're so even. It's which team is going to play their better hockey, who can impose the will. I don't know that even home ice even comes into play in any of these matchups in the Big Ten. I really think that the road teams have no real problem. They can go in and win these games. The best of three, I think, favors the home team a little bit, but the reality is that I think that all three of these series are so wide open. If Notre Dame, Michigan State, and Wisconsin ended up advancing, I wouldn't be surprised.
One other thing on the Big Ten, we just learned from our executive editor, Todd Molesky, that the Big Ten, for handshakes because of the coronavirus, is recommending that the teams do gloved fist bumps instead of handshakes after the game. So we'll have to keep an eye on all of that. And certainly that's something we're watching, as is the NCAA. Well, let's turn to ECAC Hockey. That's a league that's known for 3-game series and multiple overtimes, and this weekend may not be the difference. I'm going to hit up the big notes on each one of these series, and then we can talk about what we might want to see out of it. Brown is at Colgate for a weekend, but the Raiders went 1-6-2 in February, including losing to Brown. A third of Brown's scoring coming from their rookies. Let's look at Princeton at Dartmouth. Dartmouth was ranked number 20 late in January. They're 3-7-1 since. They've won both meetings, the Big Green have, over Princeton. St. Lawrence at Harvard. Harvard won at home back in January. and then got upset, blown out really, as they tried to come back but couldn't against St. Lawrence on February 22nd. That after a win at Clarkson the night before for the Crimson. And then Union at Yale. It's been a really tough season for Union, just 5 wins in the league. And Yale blanked Union College both times, 2-0 in Schenectady and 5-0 at the Whale.
I'll tell you, if there's one series, you just mentioned it, that I'm really watching that could be an upset, I think Union has the talent, and Yale has not played the best hockey down the stretch. I think Union over Yale could be an upset here. That's just my one guess. I know that Harvard lost to St. Lawrence up in the Great North a couple of weeks ago, and it was a big game because it really, took Harvard's steam out of them and ended up putting them out of a bye and into the number 5 seed. But I just don't see Harvard having a problem with St. Lawrence. Dartmouth has played well enough. I don't see them having a problem with Princeton. The Colgate-Brown series, that's pretty interesting to me. I like a lot of things about Brown, but at the same time, Colgate has some talent, and they just have to get back to what they were playing through a lot of the early parts of the season. I thought that Colgate was a better team probably in November and December than they have been since January. It's hard to maybe just dial that right back and understand that, but I also think you're facing an opponent in Brown that doesn't have the same amount of talent as Colgate has. Colgate has a lot of talent at the offensive position. So I think if there's an upset to be seen here, I really think that Union could beat Yale.
I got to agree with you on that, Jim. There's going to be an upset somewhere, you think. And Union is a team that has played, so has Yale. They have played each other in multiple overtime games. Not wishing that on them, but you never know. When we turn to the WCHA, there's one series that is heavily favored, one that is somewhat favored, and 2 that are too close to call. The heavily favored one, Alaska Anchorage, is at Minnesota State, although Anchorage picked up a tie against the Mavericks this year, although Minnesota State got the extra point in overtime up at Alaska Anchorage. Lake Superior State is at number 10, Bemidji. Lake State ousted Bemidji last season, and Bemidji hasn't made the semifinals in that league since 2017. You got to think in those two, the home teams, the ranked teams, are going to be fairly strong favorites, especially Minnesota State.
I would think so. I know that there was a tight game between Anchorage and Minnesota State this year, but I still favor Minnesota State. They've done so many things right since the break, and I just don't see them even kind of faltering a little bit. This could be actually one of those series where they just blow out their opponent. You never know in the playoffs. But Bemidji, I think that they are in pretty good position. Lake Superior, I thought that they were a very good team early. I don't think that they've carried that into the second half enough. Ends up being a 7th place finish for them. I think that there's dangers, but I don't think that there's a threat to lose that series for Bemidji.
The 2 close ones won the longtime rivalry between Michigan Tech and Northern Michigan. Tech won 3 of the 4 meetings this season, but last weekend it was a loss at home and a win on the road for the 2 teams, and they will meet up again in what should be a real bit of a grudge match. And then the other one that is going to be close, Bowling Green is at Alaska. Those 2 teams tied for points, but Alaska won the tiebreaker. They've had 2 meetings this year, back on February 14th and 15th. Alaska got the 3-on-3 extra point in a 2-2 tie. Bowling Green got the shutout point in a 3-3 tie the next night. This is going to be an interesting series, and hats off to Alaska for getting to host a home playoff series.
Certainly, but you know what? I'm a gambler, and I look at certain results, and Bowling Green and Michigan Tech are 2 of the better road teams in the WCHA this year. Michigan Tech, 12 road wins, Bowling Green 10. And then you have Northern Michigan just 9 home wins, Alaska just 7. It's one of those things that I look at this and I say the road teams should be favored here almost because of the fact that they've been so good on the road this year. I look at Michigan Tech and Northern. That's just going to be a bloodbath series, and I don't mean in a bad way. I just think that there are such rivals. There's going to be a lot of. It's going to be a heavy series. There's going to be checking. There's going to be maybe some late hits. It's going to be a difficult series to officiate in my mind. And then Alaska, Bowling Green, I think that their styles kind of match up really well with each other. And Alaska has shown that they can be gritty this season. And, their defense has been excellent. And I think that is one thing that might carry them through. Bowling Green at the same time, they can be an explosive offense. And when their offense gets going, they're going to be hard to contain. Again, like I said, they have 10 wins on the road, 10-4-3 on the road. Michigan Tech, 12-6-1 on the road. The only team in the conference with more road wins overall is Minnesota State. They have a 13-2-1 road record. So I look at road teams in both of those series. They're both very dangerous.
Well, we're going to turn to the two leagues that have a final weekend of the regular season. Let's start with the easy one, the NCHC. There are a couple of teams battling for home ice, and actually you should throw Denver in there because they have the Gold Pan last two games against Colorado College, home and home this weekend. Denver, with one win, can clinch a home ice series in the first round of the NCHC. But Western Michigan, which has Miami, and St. Cloud State, which has two games at Minnesota Duluth, the team they swept at home earlier in the season, both have a chance to finish in the top four.
Yeah, the biggest series there is St. Cloud and Minnesota Duluth. And just because of the fact that St. Cloud needs the wins to move up, give themselves a chance at home ice. And they've been playing well. But I still think that going to Duluth, that's a very tough trip. And home ice does play a real factor in that. I think, St. Cloud, a 5-7-4 team on the road. They haven't played well on the road. They've been much better at home. I just look at that as a big uphill battle. But, you win one of those games, two of those games, maybe you get some points from both. Maybe you get 4 out of 6, maybe you get 5 out of 6. And now you're in the conversation, because if Western or Denver slip up, then it's a big difference. And listen, they're playing the bottom two teams in the league, and Denver playing Colorado College, Western playing Miami, but you just never know. This has been a pretty unpredictable league down the stretch. And I would think that it's probably going to be North Dakota, Minnesota, Duluth, Denver, Western Michigan in that order for the top 4 spots. But if St. Cloud slips in there, I'm not overly shocked, because they're a very good team. We know how well they've played in the second half of the season. You just never know when they can slip in and suddenly be a home ice team. I still think that Denver and Western get in there.
Well, let's turn to Hockey East, and I think we need like a calculator, a computer, some Excel spreadsheets.
I just want an abacus. An abacus, I think, would be fine. The very large abacus should be able to somehow get us the math to do this league.
But Brian Smith from Hockey East has printed out all the different possibilities. Seeded 3 with a win, seeded 4 with a tie, seeded 5 with a loss, a main loss. Those are the kind of things that are on the sheet. But bottom line, BU, Providence, Northeastern, and New Hampshire are the 4 teams playing for the 3 remaining playoff spots. What's the big matchup? What are the big contests this weekend?
Well, I mean, the fact that BU and Northeastern play each other and they're in that mix is a big part of it. Right, that's start right away. One of those teams sweeps, particularly if Boston University sweeps Northeastern, that leaves Northeastern with 21 points. So New Hampshire would just need a point or two. I'm not even sure where the tiebreaker goes against Boston College. Now, listen, that's a yeoman's effort for New Hampshire at this point to beat Boston College, but they did it already once this season. They won a 1-0 game in overtime at home way back in, I think it was December. And so it's not impossible to think that New Hampshire could take out BC. I was writing in a column earlier today that, maybe because New Hampshire needs the wins and BC knows where they're going, maybe BC rests some players. No, they won't. We know Jerry York well enough. He always plays for the pairwise. He understands that every game means something. So he'll have his top lineup ready to go. Unless there's some minor injuries that you might just sit a guy that you might not typically, that's the only place I could see any sort of fluctuation in the lineup. So I think that New Hampshire is going to have their hands full with Boston College. That said, Providence and Maine, they're playing each other. And Maine is trying to get into a home ice position. Providence is trying to get into a playoff position. There's a lot on the line there. And then that BC Northeastern series should be just no pun intended, a dogfight as the Terriers and the Huskies go at it. I think that, BU feels like they've played well, but Northeastern, I don't know why they haven't played well over the last 2 weekends. I know that Tyler Madden's missing from their lineup, but they have to be a team that knows how to just turn the key and find a way. I think I predicted this week that each team would win at home in that series. I don't know if that's going to be wrong. It could be way off because I don't really know what the chemistry is right now in either locker room.
Jim Madigan's Huskies really got to be feeling the pressure and the desperation. They could have put this whole thing away and clinched a playoff spot last weekend, but then got swept by Vermont.
I mean, they should be in a position that this weekend should have been about home ice, not making the playoffs. And now they're actually, 17, 12, and 3 overall. They're not in the NCAA tournament right now. They have to start winning some games. They have to start winning this weekend. Then a quarterfinal series win. I mean, if they win the next 4 games, 2 against BU this weekend, and then 2 in the quarterfinals, they likely have an easy path to the NCAA tournament. But right now, they're not in a position to make the NCAA tournament. That would be a bit of a shocker for a team that a month ago was just rolling.
Well, we're going to look at all of this on Monday on our Weekend Review podcast. Certainly, we're going to have some crazy results out of that and try to decipher what happened and what's going to happen going forward. We'll have that on Monday. By the way, if you missed it, we had a terrific conversation this week on USCHO Spotlight with Cornell head coach Mike Schaefer. Make sure you check that out. All of our podcasts are available at uscho.com/podcasts. We've been sponsored by the 2020 NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.